Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Mina. In this video, you'll be learning how to make this beautiful dress with this design in front. If this is what you're interested in, please stick around and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Without wasting much of your time, let's get started. Okay, so I've already drawn a starting line. From the starting line, I'll come down by 10.1 to mark my bust point, and still from the starting line, which is also my shoulder line, I'll mark my under bust, which is 14.5, and also mark 17 inches as my waist length. Okay, so place your tape on the starting line, come down by your bust measurement, also mark your under bust and also your waistline. Then I'll label what each line stands for. That's my bust point. The second one is my under bust, and the third one is my waistline. Okay, so the next thing is to place my tape on the center front and mark my neck width. Okay, so I'm going to use a basic neckline for this. That is in 3 by 3, neck width of 3 inches and neck depth of 3 inches. So I'll come down by 3 inches as well for my neck depth. Then I'll use my curve ruler to connect it together as shown. The next step is to place my tape still from the center front, and I'll come in by 7 inches for my shoulder. My shoulder is 14 divided by 2, I have 7. So I'm going to mark half of my shoulder measurements there, which is 7. On where I mark my shoulder measurement, I'll place my tape there, then I'll come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. I'll mark the 1 inch, then I'll use my straight ruler to connect it into the neck width. After that, the next thing is to place your tape on the shoulder slope and come down by your chest line. My chest line is 7.1. How you can determine this is by dividing your bust circumference by 6 and adding 1.5 to it. So when I divided mine, I had 7.1. That is exactly what I marked there. Then I'll bring my shoulder measurements down here just to have a straight line. Okay, so the 7 inches I took on my shoulder line, I brought it to this chest line like so, and I roll a line across that point. So I'm gonna ahead to label the chest line. So the next thing I'm going to do is, the next step is to also connect from the shoulder slope to the chest line, just like so. After that, the next thing you're going to do is to place your tape from the shoulder slope and measure what you have from the shoulder slope to the chest line, and fold your tape into two to get the midpoint. Or you can just mark half of whatever you have instead of folding your tape. From the midpoint, go in by ½ inch and mark. Then on the chest line, what you're going to mark there is your bust circumference, quarter of your bust circumference. Mine is 8.5. That is exactly what I'm going to mark there. Then I'll come in with my straight ruler. I have to extend this line first. Then I'll use my straight ruler to connect from the midpoint to the shoulder slope. So what we are doing right now is to form our armhole. After connecting that, I'll use my curve ruler to connect from the midpoint down to my bust measurement, or to the chest line, just like so. So we are done forming our armhole. The next thing we are going to do is to take our dart. On the bust point, I'm going to mark half of my nipple to nipple measurement, or you can call it bust span. My nipple to nipple measurement is 8. I'm going to mark half of it, which is 4 inches on the bust point. I will equally mark the same thing on the under bust, 4 inches, and also on the waistline, same 4 inches. So go ahead and do the same thing. Whatever your nipple to nipple measurement is, or bust span measurement is, mark it on the bust point, mark it on the under bust, and also on your waistline. Then after that, use a straight ruler to connect all of them together. On the waistline, mark ½ inch on both sides of the line, the dart line you just created. Okay. Then after marking ½ inch on both lines, use a straight ruler to connect it into the bust point, just like so. So we are done creating our darts. The next thing is to take our accurate body measurement and also to add allowance. So on this chest line, I've already marked quarter of my bust circumference, which is 8.5. What I'm going to do next is to add 1.5 inch as my seam allowance. So I'll go ahead and mark 1.5 inch as my seam allowance. Then on the waistline, go ahead and mark quarter of your waist measurement. Mine is 6.5. I'll go ahead and mark 6.5 there. Then I'll also replace the dot of 1 inch that I took. You've seen there, I just replaced the dot of 1 inch. Then the same 1.5 inch seam allowance that I took on the chest line, I'm also going to repeat the same thing on the waistline. So I'll mark 1.5 inch as my seam allowance. Then I'll use a straight ruler to connect it together on from the chest line to the waistline. So first I will have to extend that line. Then I'll use the straight ruler to connect from the chest line to the waistline, just like so. Okay, I took my accurate measurements first before adding the allowance. So I'm also going to indicate my accurate body measurement and the allowance that I added to it. Okay. There is always a difference between our front half length and our back half length. So go ahead and measure your front half length and your back half length. Whatever the difference is, use it as your side dart. So my front half length is 17 inches, while my back half length is 15.5. The difference between 15.5 and 17 inches is 1.5 inch. So the 1.5 inch is what I'm going to use as my side dart. So bringing whatever you have as the difference between your half length and your front length to use as a side dart is going to help the front and the back to align. Okay. So after that, the next thing is to go ahead and cut it out. We are done drafting the front pattern. The next step is to draft the back pattern. So I've gone ahead to mark out 1.5 inch for my zipper, and here is my starting line. So from the starting line, which is also my shoulder line, I'll come down by the length of my back measurement. Okay, like for the front, I use 17 inches as my waist length. So for this back, I'm going to use what, 15.5. So after marking my waist measurements, I'll use a stretch ruler to roll the line across like so. Then I'll go ahead and label it waistline. Next step is to take the neckline for the back. So from that line of the zipper, I'll go in by 3 inches for my neck width. Then I'll go down by 1 inch for my neck depth. After marking 1 inch for my neck depth, I'll use my curve ruler to connect the neck width and the neck depth together, just like what you're seeing on the screen. After that, the next step is to also place my tape from the center back from that line there and mark my shoulder measurements. Like I said, my shoulder is 14 divided by 2 is 7. So I mark half of my shoulder measurement, and I also came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. Then I connected it into the neck width as shown. After that, the next step is to place your tape on the shoulder slope and come down by your chest line. Mine is 7.1. How to get this is by dividing your bust circumference by 6 and adding 1.5 inch to it. When I divided mine, I got 7.1. That's exactly what I marked there. Then I'll use a straight ruler to mark the line across as shown. Then I'll go ahead and label what the line stands for. The next step is to connect from my shoulder slope down to the chest line with a straight line. The next thing we are going to do is to create our armhole. What you have to do is to place your tape from the shoulder slope and measure down to the chest line. Go ahead and fold your tape into two to determine the midpoint. Mark whatever you have as the midpoint. Then place your tape on the midpoint and go in by half inch and mark. Then on the chest line, go ahead and take quarter of your bust circumference. Quarter of mine is 8.5. I'm going to mark 8.5 there. Remember, we are following that zipper line to input all our measurements. We are not extending it out of that line. Okay, so the allowance of 1.5 inch I marked is for what? Is for zipper. Okay, so after marking the 8.5, I'll come in with my curve ruler to create my armhole, just like what you are seeing on the screen. So after that, on the waistline, I'm going to input my dart. I'll take my dart on the waistline. So I'll take half of my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 4 inches. My bust span is 8 divided by 2 is 4. That's exactly what I marked there. Then I'll use my straight ruler to connect it to the chest line as shown. Then on that line, I'll go out on both sides by 1 inch. So following the dart leg, go ahead and mark 1 inch on one side and mark 1 inch on the other side. Then use a straight ruler to connect it into the chest line like so. I had to use my marker pen for the dart so you can see it clearly. So the next step is to take your bust circumference on your chest line. So quarter of my bust circumference is 8.5, which I have already taken when I was trying to create the armhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is to add allowance to it of 1.5, the same thing I added to the front half length. So on the waistline, I'm going to mark quarter of my waist circumference, which is 6.5, and I'm also going to replace the dart of 1 inch. So after replacing the dart of 1 inch, the same 1.5 inch that I took as my allowance on the chest line, I'm also going to take the same thing on the waistline. I'll use my straight ruler to connect it as shown. I'm also going to indicate the accurate measurement and the allowance I added to it, just the same thing I did to the front. I will go ahead and extend the waistline into the zipper allowance. In order to eliminate zipper bulge, from the center back, I'll come in by ½ inch, then I'll connect it slantly into the chest line. Part of ½ inch that I just marked is going to be cut off. If you notice I did not add seam allowance to the down part, if you are cutting yours, make sure you add your seam allowance. I only added it to the side, which you know, for the front and the back, but I'm going to add it when I'm transferring it to fabric. That's because I'm used to drafting with my accurate body measurement before I add the necessary allowance when I'm transferring it to fabric. Okay, so after that, go ahead and cut it out. When you are done cutting, go ahead and label it back. So we are done drafting our front half length and our back half length. The next thing we are going to draft now is the down part, which is the skirt part. So I'll be using this paper to draft both the front and the back skirt. So I've gone ahead to fold in the part I'll be using for the back as shown. Then this line that I just drew is a starting line and is also going to serve as my waistline. So place your tape on the starting line, which is also your waistline, and measure your hip line, that is your waist to your hip line. Mine is 9 inches. I'll go ahead and mark 9 inches there. Then I'll use a straight ruler to roll the line across. That's my hip line that I just rolled. The next step is to place my tape still on the waistline and measure my knee length. My knee length is 21. I'll go ahead and mark 21 there. I'll also mark it on this other part so I can have a straight line when I'm rolling the line across. Then I'll use my straight ruler to roll the line across as shown. So the second line is what? The second line is my knee line. I'll still place my tape on the starting line, which is the waistline, and measure the full length of the down part. I'm going to use a full length of 29 inches. So go ahead and measure yours. Wherever you want it to stop, just mark it as a full length. So I'll also mark it on this other part as well, so I can have a straight line when I'm rolling the line across. After that, I'll go ahead and label what each line stands for. That's the knee line. This one is a hip line. The down part is a full length, while the first line I drew is my waist line. The next step is to take your waist circumference on the waistline. So go ahead and place your tape from the center front and mark where you have quarter of your waist circumference. Quarter of my waist circumference is 6.5. I'll go ahead and mark 6.5. Then I'll add allowance of 1.5 inch. So I'll be using both contouring method for this skirt part. What I'm going to do is to subtract 1 inch from my hip measurement. Let's say quarter of my hip measurement is what is 9 inches. That's divided by 4. My hip measurement divided by 4 is 9 inches. So instead of me marking 9 inches, what I'm going to mark is 8 inches. Okay, so I'll subtract 1 inch from it, which I'm going to add to the bag. Okay, so if you're on the curvy side, if you're curvy, what you have to do is for you to subtract 0.5 from your hip circumference or from your hip measurement. Okay, but me, I'm not that curvy. I'm going to do what? I'm going to use 1 inch. Okay, so if you are not curvy, use 1 inch, but if you are curvy, use 0.5 inch. Okay, so after that, after marking the 8 inches, I'm going to also add allowance of 1.5 inches. The same allowance that I added to the waistline is what I'm also going to add here. To determine what you are going to mark on your knee line, subtract 1.5 from what you mark on your hip line, and whatever you have, put it on the knee line. 9.5 minus 1.5, I have 8 inches. So 8 inches is what I'm going to mark on my knee line. So on the full length, subtract 0.5 from what you mark on your knee line and mark it on the full length. So I marked 8 inches on the knee line. Then on the full length, I'm going to mark what? 7.5. The next step is to go ahead and connect all the dotted points together with my curve ruler. So I'll connect from the waistline to the hip line, from the hip line to the knee line, and from the knee line down to the full length. We are done drafting our front skirt parts. The next step is to draft the bag. So remember, I told you I was going to use this same pattern paper to draft both the front and the back. So I'll use my straight ruler to draw a straight line on this line here, just to demarcate the front and the back. I'll draw a straight line all the way down to the full length. After that, I'll go ahead and extend the hip line as shown. On this hip line, I'll mark the 1 inch I subtracted from the front that I told you I was going to bring to the back. So I'll go ahead and mark the 1 inch. If it was 0.5 you subtracted, go ahead and bring it here as well. Then on the waistline, I'm going to go in by ½ inch. Okay, from that line, I'll go in by ½ inch. Then I'll use my curve ruler to connect it into the hip line. In order to differentiate between the front and the back, I'll be using pencil for the bag. So wherever you see pencil, just know that that part belongs to the back. And wherever you see the marker pen, just know that that is for the front. Then on this hip line, I'll go down by 6 inches. Okay, on that line, I'll go down by 6 inches. Then I'll also connect it from the hip line into the 6 inches that I marked. On this other part, I'll go ahead and mark the 1 inch here. So like I said initially, if it was 0.5 you subtracted, bring it to this part as well. If it was 1 inch, do the same thing. So I'll go ahead and mark my 1 inch there. Then I'll connect it into the waistline. So on this part, I'm not going to go in by ½ inch. I will just connect it, the waistline, like so. I will also use my ruler to blend from the hip line inward like so. After that, the next step is to input our zipper allowance. So from the center back, I'll mark 1.5 inch all the way down. Remember, I told you the pencil is for the back, so I'll be following that line of pencil all the way down. Okay, so on the waistline, I'll follow the pencil line and mark 1.5. On the hip line, I'll follow that pencil line as well and mark what? 1.5, and I'll extend it all the way down 1.5 all through. Then I'll use my ruler to connect it. If you are yet to subscribe to the channel, please consider smashing the subscribe button and also like the video. If you have any question, let me know in the comment section. After connecting the zipper allowance, the next step is to cut it out. So I'm going to follow the pencil line to cut it out. Then when I'm transferring it to fabric, I'll first of all place it and cut the back first. After cutting the back, I will now trim out the pencil line and use the pattern paper to cut out the front. This video is already too long. If it's longer than this, I will not be able to post it. So the cutting and the sewing part of this video is going to come after this particular one. So the second episode is coming after this particular one. If you're yet to subscribe to the channel, please consider smashing the subscribe button and also like the video. Make sure you turn on your post notification so when I post the next one, you'll be the first to be notified. So thank you so much for watching. See you guys in my next video. Bye.